During the events of Friday the 13th Part 2, we are first introduced to Paul Holt at the Packanack Lodge, the owner of a camp that would become the first location of Jason's 1984 killing spree. Paul shares his knowledge about Jason and Pamela in the form of a campfire story that leans closer to the truth than the other counselors realize. However, Paul is the first to talk about Jason still being alive and living in the woods, with Jenny echoing the same thought later on. As the film unfolds, there are a few notable things that I've come to notice that made me look at the overall events in a different light. The first being while Jenny and Paul kiss in a nearby cabin, Crazy Ralph watches from behind a tree, only to be strangled with barbed wire by Jason while in a position that was extremely visible to anybody that may so much as peek outside. Although he's never spotted, I find it even more weird that Ralph was the only victim that night, since Jason opted not to kill Paul or Jenny while they were alone, showing a lot more restraint and patience than we're used to seeing from him in the later films. Then, after Deputy Winslow is killed after chasing Jason to the shack, nobody ever seems to find his police car, which is odd considering how narrow the road is leading from the lodge, and that no one spotted it while leaving to go to the bar that night. Next, I notice how Paul and Ted look at each other while Jenny talks about Jason's mental state from living in the woods and possibly witnessing his mother's death, and how he may not understand the meaning of death and may be waiting for his mother's resurrection. Which may seem like nothing at first, but to me, it seems as if they know something they're not sharing, almost like when you look at someone that's a part of an inside joke. Then, as Jenny and Paul leave the bar they're attending, Paul tells Ted to come back as soon as the place closes. Ted, however, then asks some of the locals about any after-hour spots as soon as Paul and Jenny are out of sight and heading back to the lodge, making it seem that Ted knew what they were to find, and Ted became too scared to return. Then, there's the incident of Jason sneaking up on Paul, only to miss a fatal strike. However, it looks almost intentional, resulting in Jason and Paul wrestling around, yet somehow Paul is knocked out and assumed dead, although there's little to no crashing that would indicate such a blow would have happened. Then, Paul finding the shack on his own, somehow being able to find his way to the shack in the nick of time to save Jenny, almost like he knew it was there the whole time. All of this formulated a few questions for me, like how were these things able to occur, and does it have something to do with Paul disappearing at the end of the film? My theory is I believe it's all connected, even to Paul's disappearance. I think Paul was initially the one manipulating Jason. He likely accomplished this by having a prior relationship with him, possibly discovering Jason at some point in the 2-month gap between part 1 and 2, using the legend to his advantage and possibly digging up Pamela's roadside grave and stealing her severed head and clothes as an offering to Jason in exchange for his loyalty, causing me to believe that Paul led Jason to Alice as well, considering the suburban area Alice lived in, which Paul likely drove Jason to in order not to cause suspicion in Jason possibly being caught, and the use of the phone, which was likely Paul calling to signal to Jason which apartment Alice was in. Paul possibly may have planned for Jason to murder everyone at the lodge with the exception of Jenny and himself. Ted was to arrive later with help, with the two having hopes of gaining the same fame Alice did for being the lone survivor of Camp Blood, killing Jason in the process to further cement their story with another slain Voorhees killer. However, at some point, Paul would discover that Jason not only survived, he was missing. And in fear for his life because of his betrayal, along with police investigating and possibly finding something he may not want them to see, Paul likely was able to find Ted and flee, resulting in his disappearance at the end of the movie. But that's my theory. Do you agree? Or do you think Paul simply died? Comment below with your own theories, and be sure to be on the lookout for my upcoming series, Dark Origins. There, I'll be giving you guys the known origins of every villain of horror. So please, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, as well as hitting the notification bell to be alerted whenever a new video is uploaded. And as always, I am JG Dark, and thanks for watching.